I'm Paul Llewellyn, and welcome to Rainmakers, where we share the stories of those making a difference in their communities. Today, we're joined by Greg, a man whose life journey is as aspiring as it is profound. Greg is an active member of Night Shift, an organization devoted to helping those facing homelessness, addiction, and other challenges on the streets. In this first episode of a four-part series, we'll explore the early chapters of Greg's life, his experiences as an adopted child, and how he navigated the unique challenges that came with it. We'll also dive into the impact of two devastating losses, how they shaped his perspective and ultimately led to him on a mission of compassion and service through Night Shift ministry. It's a story of hope rising from heartache, and I'm honored to share it with you today. Greg, welcome to Rainmakers.
Thank you, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor.
Excellent to have you. So, Greg, as we start out here, can you describe your childhood and your early years as an adopted child?
Just to give you a little history, I'm a product of two fathers and three mothers.
Wow.
Uh, Birth mother I met later on. We'll talk about the adoption part.
Mhm.
I was adopted when I was 2 years old
Okay.
by my mother, or my second mother. Her name was Charlotte, and she was from Wales. We lived in Saskatchewan. I was born in Wilkie, Saskatchewan, and we lived in Saskatoon at the time. And my dad, who was a doctor, he was a psychiatrist actually, which will be a prevalent story later. But yeah, he adopted me, and as an adopted child, he always told me that, hey, you're special. I chose you.
Wow.
Well, when you're a legitimate child and a natural birth child, you get what you get.
Mhm.
You know, whatever God has given you, that's what you
Right.
get. So you have no choice.
Mhm.
So my adopted dad always, made me feel that I was special. So
And when did you find out you were adopted, and what emotions did that bring?
I was young,
Yeah.
probably 4 or 5 years old. That it really, sunk in. Right.
So when your father told you you were special, did you feel
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Nice.
It's like when God adopts you into the big family,
Right.
you feel special, right? And I felt special at that time, but it didn't bring some issues
Right. Yeah.
for sure,
Yeah.
right? It brought lots of issues,
Okay.
and yeah.
Did being adopted bring any challenges or a different perspective for you as a child in interacting with other kids or other family members?
Yeah, yeah, I was always trouble. I was always in trouble, always fighting with other kids, whatever I could get, so I could get attention. I
Okay.
always wanted to be belonging. I wanted to belong, right?
Right.
So you strike out. In school, I was getting the strap all the time, or
Yeah.
uh, at home, I was being disciplined because I was rebellious. I was
Yeah.
very rebellious, and it got me attention. I guess at the time, I didn't realize what I was doing, but now when I look back,
Mhm.
it was a child crying out for attention.
Okay.
So that was one of the symptoms of being adopted. Is
Yeah.
you cry out for attention. You
Right.
want to belong,
Yeah.
and you know. So I did that most of my life.
I hear you. I know that from personal experience.
Yeah,
Similar, but wanting attention, you do things and become the noticed child by
yeah.
you know.
Whether it's good or bad.
That's right. Did you appreciate your father? Did you have a relationship with him? Was it just basically you're put here in this family and behave, do what you're told, or was it a loving relationship that you had with
It
your?
was a strange. In the adopted family, I was the oldest,
Okay.
and uh, it, yeah, I was always wanting to play, go out in the schoolyard, or
Hmm.
I was rebellious. He wanted to teach me things, and I wasn't. willing to listen.
Right.
So I was rebellious, like I said before.
Yeah.
I didn't, but he did teach me one thing that I really am glad that he did was
Mhm.
work ethic, and the ethic of doing what you say you're going to do,
Right.
and and so that's lived with me. I've been, I do that.
Yeah.
Uh, you can only you only can go by your word. That's how you're
Right.
judged in the world. You do what you say and say
Yeah.
what you do.
That's right. I think that's gone away a lot today, but my father was the same way. Yeah, your worth ethic means a lot and taught a
Yeah,
lot to me
yeah.
to do that. So I just have another question. How did you cope with feelings of being different as an adopted child? Did the other kids in the family treat you differently? Uh, were you made fun of at school for being adopted, or was it just not really mentioned much?
It wasn't mentioned that much. I
Okay.
mean, I had another sibling who was he was a year and 7 days younger than me.
Okay.
He was also adopted.
Mm.
So the two of us were adopted basically at the same time.
Right.
And then my third mother and my dad, they had 4 children.
So, Greg, in a few short years, your life went through, you changed locations, you moved
Yeah.
across continents, you had your family changed. How did you handle that?
Well, you're young.
Yeah.
I guess you handle it by. I had acquired a Scottish accent, and when my first day in school, the local bully approached me, and I was in a fist fight my first day in school,
Wow.
right? So you
Yeah.
had to, because they were making fun. So I always stepped up to kind of that kind of thing, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's how I reacted, whether it was fighting or sports, whatever it be. That's how I reacted.
I'm just amazed at how you went through so much, but you didn't have an out. You couldn't leave. You were too young. You couldn't
Yeah,
go to another family or
no,
then you were put into a boarding school. While your
yeah,
mother, uh, other
but
mother and father went off.
yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, I always in trouble there. That
Wow.
seemed to be the common factor. I
Yeah.
was always in trouble, mischievous or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah,
So, Greg, it sounds like with your story, there was a lot of experience of loss. You lost your second mother to breast cancer. Uh, being given up in adoption, that's a loss. No matter how young
yeah,
you are, it's
yeah,
something you experience. Talk a little bit about your loss that you. There's other losses that you experienced in your family that helped shape you and help mold you and help impact you throughout your life. So, tell us about some of the other people that probably aren't here now or that you
okay,
lost
all
while
right.
growing
Well,
up.
the big one would be my father, my adopted father, who I didn't know any other father
Hmm.
than him. Uh, I was in school in 1970. I can never forget it. It was June the 12th, 1973.
Okay.
I was writing a math exam, and the teacher, there was a teacher in the hallway, and knocking on the door. And usually, typically, when you're in an exam or anything like that, they just, do not disturb.
Right.
There's got to be a big issue if there's somebody disturbing
Mm.
at the door. So there was a knock on the door. Everybody, kids are curious, so everybody was looking up, and the teacher that was basically chaperoning the exam to make sure nobody was cheating or
Hmm.
whatever, whatever they do. And she goes to the door. She talks a little while to this other teacher, and they talk. And she turns around and looks directly at me, and she had this look of horror on her face. And she said, "You need to go to the principal's office right away." I'm going, "This is not good. Uh, I have to go to the principal's office right away." So I go down there, and typically, like I said before, I'm always in trouble. Uh, I was figured the principal was going to give me a lecture about something I did or didn't do. So he said, "I'm going to drive you home. You have to go home right away. There's a family emergency." So I'll never forget the drive home. If you're familiar with St. John, New Brunswick, there's a bridge that goes across the Bay of Fundy. There was called the Harbor Bridge.
Right.
And he was driving exceptionally fast. And in those days, you didn't wear seatbelts, and I was being tossed back and forth in the back seat. And he finally gets to my house, and he says, "Goodbye." And I get out of the car, and at the front of my house, and the dog is there, laying in the front yard, and usually he's always receptive to see you, wag your tail. He just laid there, and my other brother was at the side of the yard and looking despondent. And then my mother, Elizabeth, my third mother, come out and says, "Your father just shot himself."
Oh, wow.
And I'm going, "Oh," right?
Yeah.
And this, I was 19 years of age at that time.
Okay. Wow, that's a traumatic
Yeah,
thing.
it's a really traumatic experience. I didn't see it, but I had 5 other brothers, and my brother Tony, who I mentioned before, he was writing an exam as well.
Okay.
And my other brothers, we lived directly across from a school, in St. John, and my brother James saw them taking him out in on a gurney with everything covered over. He
Right.
tells me how you remember things,
Yeah.
and that's what he remembered.
Yeah.
And my youngest brother, who wasn't in school at the time, his name was John, caught him. He went into it. My dad had an office or a study,
Right.
what he used to call, where he used to, he was a doctor, a very well-read man, very educated. Even in depression, he was, a genius. They tested him. But anyway, he took a 22 rifle, sat on his couch in his office, put it under his chin,
Yeah.
and pulled the trigger. And my 6-year-old brother found him,
Yeah.
with his brains blown out and blood all over the place.
Yeah.
He was the first to walk in and see that.
Wow. And that never leaves your mind. It's etched in there forever.
Yes,
Yeah.
it never. So, as you say, the history of me, I was losing. I was always losing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The loss. It was prevalent in my life.
So how did that shape your journey going forward? Just having all those losses, did it give you a negative impact in life, or did it, did you look up and said, "I can do better," or that, or how did it shape? How did it move you through that?
That's I guess is the difficult question. Looking back, you could say it did a bunch of things, but I look back and I think about, first of all, just to set my dad, when adoption or suicide is a terrible, terrible.
Right.
God never intended that for anybody.
Yeah.
But he was setting me up.
Yeah.
I was terribly mad at him.
Wow. Okay.
I'll never forget the conversation. When you're 19 years old, or at that time when he asked me the question, I was probably 18. He said, "If I wasn't here, what would you do?" I said, "You're 18. Don't worry about me, Dad. I got lots of friends."
Yeah.
That was my response to that.
And you didn't know that he was leading in that.
He led me
Yeah.
into this. He
Yeah.
was planning this suicide
Right.
right from the get-go.
Yeah.
And, to be fair to him, I told you he was in wars, and he witnessed a lot of things. I mean, one story he told me, he was a flying doctor. He found a man, he had 75 bullet holes in him,
Wow.
machine gun.
Yeah.
He looked like a sieve. And people, he lived for half an hour.
Yeah.
He went through all those war stories that most people that are in a war, they never talk about. But he used to wake up in the middle of the night screaming,
Yeah.
the terror of war
Really.
and all that, what it brought. And then, of course, he was a psychiatrist, so he listened to everybody's problems.
Yeah.
That was a big issue, that destroyed our family, basically.
Did your family at that time have any faith journey at that time? Were they believers in God, or
Yeah,
just,
I think they were, everybody says they're believers
Yeah.
in God. We had we were Anglicans, or so-called Anglicans, because my Elizabeth was an Anglican.
Right.
from. Anyway, so we went to church because in order to join the Boy Scouts, which were our neighbors,
Hmm.
being friends, that you had to go to church. And
Wow.
that's where they had Boy Scouts. So
Okay.
we would go to church. But
Yeah.
did we take in anything? No. And lots of times my brother Tony and I would, our parents they wouldn't come. They would just give us some money to put on the tithe plate, right?
Right.
The offering plate. And we would walk right by and walk right by and keep the money.
So,
Right.
so during those tragedies, Greg,
Yeah,
you didn't really have a hope and faith at that time. It was
absolutely. I would say no. No.
okay.
If
Yeah.
uh, if I even mentioned God, I was I was mad at him for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. How did these events push you to look for a deeper meaning in life?
Well, for me, it took a long time before I realized
Mhm.
that. I was, there has to be something better than this.
Right.
This is not what I signed up for. This is not what I dreamt of as a boy,
Yeah.
what my life would be,
Right.
right? So this wasn't what I signed up for.
Yeah.
And, how did I react, to my dad's death?
Hmm.
Uh, I started drinking
Yeah.
heavily, chasing girls.
Mhm.
I did all of it, all that kind of stuff to hide that.
Yeah.
And my drunken stupors, it always ended up in rages.
Yeah.
When you're traumatized, typically it always ends up in rage and anger.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I reacted to my dad's death.
Okay.
And then yeah,
Was there a specific moment when you felt you couldn't carry the pain anymore?
yeah, when I was 51 years old.
Wow. That long. That for
Yeah,
you carried a lot.
I carried a lot.
Yeah.
I carried a lot. I hit a lot,
Mhm.
but it came out in the booze and the drinking and the rages, right?
Really.
Yeah,
Were there any other losses that you experienced?
yeah.
Yeah.
In 1973, I moved from St. John
Yeah.
to Halifax, Uh, um, and I was living with a family, and yeah, I met this woman,
Mhm.
and I was smitten by her,
Yeah.
and that ended up being my wife,
Mm.
which I told you before. We've been married for 48 years,
Amazing.
and that's a miracle.
Yeah.
We started back to what 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 happened. Secondly, uh, there's two deaths and suicide that were prominent,
Mhm.
but there was also a death of a child.
Yeah.
That happened between the second suicide.
Mhm.
We got married. We had a child. We had we had two children. The second one was Julie,
Mhm.
and at 4 years of age, she died of spinal meningitis, and that was a huge, huge loss. And
Yeah.
you're supposed to outlive your children.
Right.
You never that is a thing that changes you forever.
Yeah.
You never I don't think you ever really get over that.
I've never gone through that, but and I can't even imagine what that would be like.
Yeah, it's just think of your children and
Yeah.
they're gone.
So, Greg, there's a lot of loss there and experiencing loss of a child for you and your wife.
Mm.
But you mentioned another suicide. Tell me the circumstances around that.
Well, remember I mentioned that my brother John, my youngest brother,
Yeah.
found my dad.
Mhm.
He witnessed all that, the guts and gore of that death. Uh, he was never ever recovered from that. Um,
Mhm.
Here was a guy that was being interviewed by National Geographic.
Wow.
He was a real good photographer,
Yeah.
and they were going to interview him in New Brunswick. There was Miramichi, where they fish salmon, and the famous baseball player Dick, who his average was over 400. Dick
Okay.
Williams, I think his name
Yeah.
was, and he had a launch. He had a big resort there, and people who used to fly in and fish at Miramichi for salmon
Hmm.
in New Brunswick. And he they were flying him up in a bush plane, and he got drunk.
Okay.
You know, he was he was drunk. He couldn't handle it. That's how he was treating his life. He was drunk, and he was, you know, he's always out of, you know, kind of similar to what I was like. He just didn't react well to what happened, what he witnessed. So going down the road all the way to 215, he was in Australia, and he was getting a second chance for National Geographic for an interview.
Mm-hmm.
And and he was living with my mother, Elizabeth, who had moved to Australia
Mm-hmm.
uh, in 2000. You know, she was scared of whatever. She was, anyway, so she moved to Australia. You know, that same thing, we moved from
Right.
we were movers, right?
Yeah.
We just kept moving, running from our problems, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, what you would call it. And anyway, long story short, he hung himself in his trailer in
Oh,
Australia. He could never ever get over that.
yeah.
So once again, another big loss.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I, how did I react? You know, and I was a Christian at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I said, why didn't I talk to him more about God, you know, in the hope of God?
Right.
You know, so you blame yourself, but we weren't we weren't close because of the age difference, and
Mm-hmm.
we didn't live in the same areas.
Right.
I'm making excuses, but uh, yeah, I was. They chose death. I chose hope and life in Jesus. That's,
Okay.
you know, that was the saving grace for me.
Yeah.
But back to the second death, and it, you know, John could never, you know, and today people
Mm-hmm.
they struggle. They think it's a romantic thing to do. It's a brave thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, and they think people that are suicidal, they um, they think you're doing you a favor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they don't think well of themselves. They don't think you're just a problem. So I'll get rid of it. But what it does is it leaves a trail of disaster. You know, and I'm speaking from experience,
Mm-hmm.
and that's some of the, you know, I can take those things
Yeah.
and use them as powerful tools to help others. And you know, that's what God wanted me to do in
Right.
order to heal myself. But I'm digressing. Sorry.
No, no, that's fine, Greg. But how did these early challenges prepare you for the work that you're doing now? You went through so much loss. You experienced
Yeah,
enough for 10 people.
yeah,
How did all that you went through help you in what you're doing now, like with Night Shift and the ministries that you're involved in?
yeah. Well, you could have empathy. You could see these people that are walking around. They look like they're from another planet,
Hmm.
uh, and they're lost, and uh, they just want to be loved too.
Right.
And I right away was smitten with the homeless,
Yeah.
and that's where I met Jesus. You know, I met Jesus on the street. I didn't meet him in church. I
Really.
met him on the street. You know, I was
Yeah.
baptized in church, but you know, it wasn't. I realized that I belonged on the street and I could help others, and Jesus was there. That's where I met Jesus, the love.
Amazing. I love to hear that.
Yeah,
So you met as you started to share and help other people. That's where you saw that you were the hands and feet of
yeah,
Jesus. Yeah.
absolutely. You know, I could relate to people.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times people on the street look at you like you know, oh, eh, you know, oh, he's a Christian and he has this great life, and
Hmm.
you know, he lives in a house with a white picket fence and he's never gone through anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not like us.
Okay.
And you know, I'll talk about traumas of people on the street, which is amazing. You know, you think my stories, some of the stories are just horrific,
Hmm.
and you wonder how they even are alive. But
Right.
yeah, anyway, that's, you know, what led me, you know, those traumas led me to the street,
Okay.
led me to meet Jesus.
Right. So, Greg, thank you for opening up about your early life. You've been very raw about your
Yeah,
experiences and all the challenges that you face as an adopted child, as well as the deep impact of losing your brother and father. Your story is both heartbreaking and inspiring. and it reminds of the hope that emerges even in dark times. I want to talk to our viewers for a few minutes here. Thank you for joining us in the first chapter of Greg's journey. In the next episode, we'll hear about two more life-changing events, the loss of Greg's daughter and the financial struggles he faced and how those experiences shaped his mission. We'll see you next time on Rainmakers. Have you been moved by Greg's impactful story and feel inspired to help us continue bringing these impactful moments to life? Your support is essential for us to keep showcasing the volunteers making a difference. If you would like to contribute to the production of Hope Channel Canada and its ministry, it's easy. Visit agentsofhope.ca, where you'll find various ways to donate. You can do it through debit, credit, Google Pay, Apple Pay, or send an e-transfer to Agents of Hope at hopetv.ca. Prefer mailing a check? Send it to Hope Channel at 1148 King Street East, Oshawa, Ontario, L1H 1H8. For a more personal connection, call us at 1-855-4HOPE-TV. That's 1-855-446-7388. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Hope Channel Canada, and click the notification bell so you never miss an episode. You can also watch the show on multiple platforms: hopetv.ca, cable TV, the Roku app, and the Hope Channel app. Are you looking for answers to life's most profound questions? Hope Study provides free online Bible courses that cover essential topics, all at your own pace and from the comfort of your own home. One of the courses, Forgive to Live, explores the power of forgiveness and its importance for emotional and spiritual well-being. This study provides practical biblical guidance to help you let go of resentment and find peace. Discover how forgiveness can bring healing and renewal to life. Signing up is easy and completely free at hopestudy.ca. Begin your journey today and feel free to share this valuable resource with anyone else seeking answers. Uncover life's answers by visiting hopestudy.ca and start your journey today.